Have you ever stopped to think of the dangers? Adelaide teenager Carly Ryan was lured online.
A Victorian man found guilty of murdering teenager Carly Ryan wants an Adelaide court to quash his conviction.
She thought she had fallen in love only to be killed after a physical meeting with her so-called boyfriend. Let's look at the events surrounding the death of Carly Ryan in this video. Carly Ryan, a teenager from Stirling, South Australia, was tragically deceived and killed by Francis Newman, a 50-year-old serial paedophile from Melbourne, Australia. Newman acted as though he was an imaginary boy named Kane, who was 18 years old and enjoyed listening to the same music as Carly. In addition to that, he pretended to be the stepfather of a made-up youngster who went by the name Shane. Ryan and her mother, Sonia Ryan, made their home in Stirling, which is located in South Australia. She made a friend on MySpace and vampirefreaks.com who went by the name Kane, approximately 18 months before she passed away. They both pretended to be youngsters from different parts of the country, specifically Texas and Melbourne. After some time, their acquaintance developed into a love connection that took place primarily over the phone and online. During an interview with Studio 10, Sonia mentioned that she had witnessed Carly using the computer at some point in the past, and that she had spotted a recurring image of a boy typing. However, Sonia was unaware at the time that the image would repeatedly appear on the screen. In January of 2007, Gary Newman made the false claim that he was Shane from Melbourne and that he was Brandon's biological father. He did this in order to present Ryan with a nurse's uniform and lingerie, despite the fact that Brandon did not, in fact, exist. After having a conversation with her mother, he was granted authorization to attend Ryan's 15th birthday celebration and stay overnight there. After the two of them went shopping together, Newman's demeanor during the party changed to become more possessive and erratic. He made unwanted sexual advances, such as lying on Ryan's bed or touching him inappropriately. Sonia Ryan, who was there, approached Newman and requested that he leave. Following the events of this occurrence, Sonia began keeping a closer eye on Ryan's activity on the internet. On February 19, 2007, as Newman was experiencing strong feelings of rage, he accompanied his son, who was 17 years old, on a trip back to Adelaide. They pretended to be Brandon and convinced Carly to meet with them in order to get what they wanted. They kept Carly's mother in the dark about where they were going and why. Carly accompanied Newman and his kid to Horseshoe Bay Beach in Port Elliot, South Australia, while the three of them were attending the meeting. Unfortunately, they were responsible for the tragic ending of her life on February 19th, when they suffocated her with beach sand late at night. The body of the woman was discovered floating in the water close to the coast the following morning. Within 11 days of the crime, law authorities found Gary Newman's apartment and acquired enough evidence to arrest him for the murder of Carly. After an investigation lasting 11 days, the police were able to track down Gary Newman in Victoria. It was determined that he was talking to a 14-year-old girl from Western Australia while logged into his computer as Kane. The girl was from Western Australia. He was taken into custody and charged with Carly's murder after her body was found. After a trial in the Supreme Court that lasted for more than 3 months, the jury decided that Francis Newman should be found guilty of the crime of murder. Text contributed by the user. He was sentenced on March 31, 2010. Rewritten to read, the individual was sentenced on March 31, 2010. A judge in South Australia named Justice Trish Kelly issued an order that the person be sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 29 years. Gary Newman's profoundly disturbed plan to deceive, entice, and ultimately kill Carly merited a life sentence, according to Justice Kelly's statement. They had inflicted a terrible act of cruelty on a sweet and naive young lady who was 15 years old at the time. According to the statements made by Justice Kelly, the person who was referred to as she was actually a little child who developed a crush on a man named Kane. On the other hand, it was found out that the real Kane was a middle-aged man who was overweight and balding, and he had evil intentions involving sexual misconduct and murder. Carly was allegedly the subject of a serious sexual preoccupation on the part of the individual in question, as indicated by Justice Kelly. This preoccupation grew to the point where, when they were unable to satisfy their needs, They began plans for, and eventually carried out, the act of killing her. Ultimately, this passion led to their deaths. Carly is characterized as a stunning young lady who is compassionate, loving, and fantastic, and who still has most of her life ahead of her. A self-centered, perverted, and deviant sexual predator destroyed Carly's hopes, ambitions, and future by taking advantage of her. In the end, he was given a sentence of life in prison, with a requirement that he serve a minimum time of 29 years before being eligible for parole consideration. The case drew attention to the expanding problems of catfishing, child grooming, and other forms of predatory behavior that can occur online. Carly was the first person in Australia to be killed by an internet predator. Therefore, her death made headlines across the country. After Newman was arrested and put on trial, public opinion helped play a role in the enactment of nationwide law, measures that came to be known as Carly's Law. These adjustments were made in order to improve the safety of the online experience for children and teenagers. Investigation. Later, on February 19th, Ryan left the house for what appeared to be a sleepover with friends. However, when he did not return the following day, his parents called the police. The next morning, Ryan's beaten and disheveled body was discovered floating face down in the shallow water at Horseshoe Bay in Port Elliot. Despite numerous attempts to bring her back to life, they were unsuccessful. The autopsy found a total of 19 individual injuries, with 6 to 8 of them being blows to the head. The facial damage, suffocation, and drowning were the contributing factors that contributed to the victim's death. Additionally, it found sand from the beach in Ryan's esophagus, as well as cannabinoids in her bloodstream. The investigators looked at security footage, which revealed that Ryan was in the area of Port Elliot on February 19th in the company of 2 men. She was said to have been seen alive at the beach at 9:30 p.m. on that day, according to witnesses. A pale blue vehicle that the guys were driving led police to the Mornington Peninsula, where a raid 11 days after the murder led to the arrest of Newman and the custody of Newman's younger son. The vehicle was utilized by the men. After conducting some research, it was discovered that Newman had maintained a notebook in which he detailed about 200 online personas, as well as additional unlawful attempts at grooming, both in Australia and internationally. Newman, who was initially not recognized by the public, acted abnormally and initially denied meeting the adolescent while he was on trial for his alleged involvement in the murder. On January 21st, in the year 2010, Newman was given a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. In spite of the fact that Newman's adoptive son, who was still a kid at the time of the murder and was a witness to it, was exonerated of all charges, his name has been concealed. After the verdict was handed down, Sonia Ryan assisted in the establishment of the Carly Ryan Foundation, a charitable organization whose mission is to encourage responsible use of the internet. The organization first began advocating for a reform in the law in 2013 in order to better the protection of kids online. This was particularly important given the fact that 25% of Australian adolescents are approached online by persons they do not know. In addition, the foundation helped raise awareness about safety issues in Australia and New Zealand, such as the utilization of online contracts, and it developed a smartphone application for children called Threed, which serves as a personal safety app. In recognition of her contributions to the local community, Sonia Ryan was presented with the South Australian of the Year award in 2013. She went on to win a number of other honors in 2017, 2018, and 2021. This is one of the saddest cases ever, as the criminals trampled on the immaturity of Carly and didn't even see her life as worth anything, as he already started looking for his next victim. For more crime cases like this, give this video a like and subscribe to this channel.